Hey everyone, this is Kit Cabello with Hard Lens Media. As we all know, everyone's focusing on the 2020 presidential election cycle, but we also want to interview candidates that want to bring in change in the United States Senate and House. And today we have a very special guest who's running for the 3rd Congressional District in the state of Wisconsin. Sir, for our viewers and subscribers, could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Justin Bonner, and I'm running for Congress in Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District.
All right, so essentially, basically, there's a moderate corporatist Democrat that's running in this district, and you are running as an independent. Obviously, can you just give our viewers and subscribers just a short history of what's important about the 3rd Congressional District, its makeup, and really what kind of challenges you're facing as you're running up against the current incumbent?
One thing I should note is I'm running in the Democratic primary, because I see that as that's the easiest way to win, basically. You need way fewer votes, of course. And it's gerrymandered fairly Democratic.
Okay. So, and so essentially, when we look at somebody like the current incumbent who's a corporatist, are you getting any kind of pushback from the DCCC, basically telling you not to run, or telling people in that district that they need to support the incumbent? What's the initial ground game that's happening in that area?
I actually haven't gotten a whole lot of that. We're just starting to get traction right around now. See, last Thursday, a local paper picked up the story that I was running, so I got to have that interview. And then once that happened, of course, I got a bunch of other emails that wanted information about me. So we're just starting to get traction, and I haven't actually gotten any proper Democratic Party, hey, stay out of this kind of things yet. All
right. Well, you're very fortunate. Some of the people we've interviewed in the past have had that situation, some not at all. But it will be interesting to see how things play out as this election cycle continues to progress. But I've been looking at your campaign website and some of the issues that you're fighting for. One of the ones that really stood out the most was your policy on Medicare for all. Why are you fighting for this issue? And you really are saying that now more than ever we need to have single-payer healthcare. Can you explain to our viewers and subscribers why you are fighting for this policy?
Absolutely. Right now in this country, we are the only industrialized country in the world that handles its healthcare system quite in this insane way that we do, where if you don't have money to afford your medication, you can just die or something. They don't care about you. So if we just handle our healthcare system like most of the rest of the world does, then, people don't have to die because they can't afford their insulin. It's a pretty basic social democratic policy that, Europe figured this out. Canada can do this. There's absolutely no reason why the U.S., the richest country in the world, can't do something incredibly simple.
And just to reiterate, too, Wisconsin's very close to the Canadian border, and who can forget when Senator Bernie Sanders took just a few Americans up north just to get their medicine and found out how insanely cheaper that is. Have you done anything similar to that to really compare and contrast the prices in the state of Wisconsin, for example, and then going to maybe one of the provinces in Canada?
I have not actually. I've never actually been to Canada in my whole life.
All right.
It's actually a bit further of a drive than it might seem at first. That said, Midwestern, we're not really opposed to a long drive, but I think it would be at least about 5 hours there and then 5 hours back.
Understandable. But it's again, it's a very interesting note that how a lot of people are fighting for single-payer healthcare, how this concept is actually starting to gain a lot of traction. And when you talk about it to perhaps your to potential voters, what are some of their questions that they bring up in regards to how you're going to be fighting for it?
Oh yeah, just going out canvassing, you can get a whole bunch of different reactions. Some people, of course, look at the sheet and they go, oh yeah, there you go, Medicare for all. That's great, I love it. And other people, they don't quite react that way. Going canvassing, of course, sometimes you run into grumpy Republicans who, one of them thought I was trying to sell them health insurance somehow. I'm not quite sure what that guy was thinking, but
right.
Overall, I think pushing these policies is a very good way, not just to win, but also to actually help people after winning. Because, these are popular policies in this district and in the rest of America.
Right. All right. And now you also bring up a very interesting concept called ranked choice voting. And on your campaign website, you say you want to get rid of the two-party system and how they're basically owned by corporations. Can you explain why you're making this one of your issues that you're fighting for, and how you really plan on convincing potential voters that this is a very good policy? Because let's face it, we do live in a two-party system where money is speech and corporations are people. Why is this an important issue for you?
Absolutely. This might even be more important than the Medicare for all. I mean, they're both really important, of course, but I digress. The ranked choice voting basically lets us break the two-party system, since it gets rid of the spoiler effect of trying to vote for third parties. So that way, with ranked choice voting, you just rank your choices on the ballot of which person you'd prefer. And we have to break this two-party system, of course. Well, we saw it in 2016. Sometimes you have two choices and they both suck.
Of course.
And a lot of people did notice that this time around. So going around and advocating for breaking the two-party system is going to be popular, because no one was really happy with their choice in 2016.
All right. And of course, when we live in a system where, people are tired of the two-party system, there's a lot of things that the political establishment is starting to ignore, or is somewhat trying to acknowledge, but doing a very miserable attempt to really defend how they're going to reform the system. Take, for example, student debt. We're stuck with this crisis where student debt is unforgivable, and unfortunately there's a lot of people who are chained with it, and now more than ever there's talk of actually student debt forgiveness. So where do you stand on student debt, and what is your plan to really address this very dangerous situation that's impacting a lot of Americans?
Oh yes, I support student debt forgiveness. I think it's really hampers our economy when a whole generation of young people basically has a mortgage just to go to college. And that means that if they're spending their money paying off that first mortgage to go to college, it's that much harder to get a second mortgage to actually buy a house or participate in the economy in any way. Mm-hmm. So yes, I support free public college. I actually support free public education all the way from kindergarten all the way through PhD or medical school or whatever it is that you're getting.
All right. I think that sounds like a plan a lot of Americans can rally behind. But I mentioned earlier how we have a two-party system where money is speech and corporations are people. What is your stance on Citizens United, and how do you plan on really addressing such a very devastating document or a law that's really impacting our political system?
Of course, it's not going to be easy. To overturn Citizens United, we may well have to have a constitutional amendment. Alternatively, there could be a court case to overturn it. Of course, neither of those are going to be easy, and we're going to have to retake Congress and the presidency just to have a chance at this. Mm-hmm. And I like to think I'm at least doing my part in trying to, help take over Congress for the progressives this time around.
Right. And for your campaign, are you a grassroots organized campaign? Like when people are hearing that you're talking about all these progressive policies, what is some of the commentary that you get on the ground as you're canvassing and reaching out to potential voters?
Of course, when you're canvassing, most people, they'll just take the handout that I give them and then they'll go back inside, and maybe they read it, maybe they throw it away. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I do get more positive responses than I get negative responses. Mm-hmm. I think it's promising. I can actually show you the handout that I give. It's right here. This is just printed out on some printer paper on the printer right behind me. I've handed out, I think, a couple hundred of these now. All it is my name, what I'm running for. Then it's just a list of policies and paragraphs explaining what they are and why we need them, and then the primary date and my website.
All right, fantastic.
That kind of canvassing goes well because, you don't want to get a piece of paper that's like, hey, here I am smiling, I'm shaking someone's hand, or I'm kissing a baby or something. That doesn't tell you anything about me or anything that you need to know at all.
All right. And you also bring up another very interesting policy called workplace democracy, and it states people have the right to vote, and that includes a vote over how their workplace is run. Workers aren't going to vote to outsource their own jobs because labor is cheaper in another country. Can you just go into more detail about really what workplace democracy is and why is this an important issue?
Sure. Basically, I like worker co-ops and the way that they work, where the corporation is run democratically, whether through direct democracy at a small level or representative democracy if it's a larger co-op. Are you familiar with worker co-ops? Probably.
Yes, we've done stories in the past and interviewed other candidates that were talking about the same thing.
Yes. In an ideal world, of course, for me, every company would be run like a cooperative. I understand that we're probably not going to get that in 2020 after the 2020 election, but I would push for as much worker representation on the boards of companies as we can get. I think it was actually Warren that suggested 40% worker representation. I'm a little bit surprised that that policy came out of Warren, but you know, it's a good policy idea, and I would run with it.
All right. Well, that's I think that's something that a lot of workers can deal with. In fact, in that district that you are running in, we know that majority areas of the Midwest were heavily industrialized. There's a lot of former steel mills and areas that have been shut down. What is the current economic situation in that area in the state of Wisconsin, the 3rd Congressional District?
It's actually not too bad. At least not as much as you might think. Of course, you can see there is one old abandoned factory that you can see from where I live, but it's actually been renovated and they use it for office space now. But the main problem isn't so much abandoned factories and such as it is lower wages. America could use a raise and all that.
All right. And so what's your initial policy on at least having a livable wage? Where do you stand on that?
Oh, of course. We absolutely need a livable wage. Now, this one kind of ties into the worker co-ops issue we just talked about, where workers generally will vote to give themselves a living wage. And if a company absolutely cannot afford to do it, then, you know, that can be handled democratically by the workers. That said, I do fully support a $15 minimum wage and tying it to inflation.
All right. All right, very good. Now, you also mentioned how you want to deal with climate change. We've covered stories on Heartlands Media about how there's a lot of areas, especially around the planet, that are being impacted by climate change. There's more talk about it amongst the international community. Sadly, we have a presidential administration that refuses to acknowledge it, and there are also people within the DNC establishment that refuse to acknowledge climate change. Where do you stand on climate change, and how do you plan on really implementing and supporting the Green New Deal should you potentially win in 2020?
Well, climate change is real and man-made. I can tell you that at the very least. And like you said, I do fully support the Green New Deal. We need zero-emission energy infrastructure as soon as we can possibly get it. Now, if we can get it by 2030, that's pretty good. If it takes us till 2035, that's not ideal, but it's better than never getting it. So, yes, like you said, Green New Deal means to build solar panels, factories that build solar panels, wind turbines, hydropower, geothermal, and I'm a proponent of nuclear power. I know that one tends to be a little bit divisive in the Democratic Party, but I am pro-nuclear power.
All right. Well, I think it's very important to really bring up the fact that we do need to have investment in renewable technologies. So in regards for the state of Wisconsin, especially in that congressional district area, has there been any kind of attempt to introduce green technologies?
Well, I don't want to say so much at the government level as it is. Well, all right, I'm going to give kind of a crappy answer here. I've seen and heard of some friends that have solar panels on the roof, and I believe there's a subsidy for that right now.
All right.
Granted, kind of a crappy answer there.
No, it's all good. I think it's very important to know that we see that there's attempt being made either by individuals or seeing that there's something being implemented at the state level as well. But you also, in your campaign website, you mentioned abolishing 3 organizations: ICE, NSA, and the CIA. Can you go into detail about really why these organizations need to be abolished, and why is this an important issue to you?
Well, they're all criminal organizations, so that's a start. The CIA, for example, is half the reason that we have so many enemies today. You know, they'll overthrow a democratically elected government in Iran and install a brutal right-wing dictator just so we can have their oil. And then they'll repeat that process or do something similar in dozens of other countries throughout Central and South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Then the NSA, I'm sure you remember the Snowden revelations a few years back about how the NSA is spying on us and doing all sorts of unethical activities as well as, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the LavaBit case. LavaBit was Edward Snowden's. LavaBit is Edward Snowden's email provider, or at least it was. It had to shut down because they got a government order to let the NSA read the emails that they were hosting, and LavaBit was an encrypted service. So to do that, they would have to compromise everyone's emails, and it was basically give the NSA the emails, or he has to shut down his company. And I don't think the government should be able to do that.
Right,
and they sent him a gag order with it too, so he wasn't allowed to talk about it.
Right. And then you also mentioned abolishing ICE, and can you go into detail about that as well?
Sure. With ICE, well, the whole point of their detainment centers is to be as cruel as they can. Mm-hmm. And tell this because they spend more money than it would take to put these people in a 5-star hotel on keeping them in terrible conditions. Mm-hmm. So the important thing to remember there is that the cruelty is the point.
Right. And
so when
go on.
Go ahead. The cruelty is the point. So when you hear about, they have to drink out of a toilet or kids separated from their parents, they were doing it on purpose because they like it.
Wow. Yeah, we've heard so many horrific stories happening there. But you also talk about how you want to help out blue-collar workers continue to be living at least with a livable wage and getting more benefits. And you talk about how automation continues to increasingly make lives difficult. Can you talk about your detail about really dealing with automation, how it's going to impact American workers as well?
Sure, automation's a tricky one because on one hand, in any sensible economy, people having to work less to get the same job done should be a good thing. It should make sense and it should improve everyone's lives. In our very brutal capitalist economy, that's not really what happens with automation. Jobs get automated and then people become unemployed and they can't find work, and that's no good. Okay. So for this, I'd say this ties a little bit into workplace democracy, where if, say, a company, they get a new machine and they can automate away some jobs, maybe those people's democratic representation in the company can at very least find them new things to do in the company. Maybe they can be trained as technicians to help maintain the machines or do some other thing, but at least it introduces some democracy in the economy so that those people who are getting laid off have some kind of a voice.
All right. I think that's a very good note to end it on. And then for our viewers and subscribers, so that we can learn more about your campaign and find you online on social media, where can they learn more about you? JustinBonner.com, or you can follow me at JustinBonner95 on Twitter. All right, Justin Bonner, thank you so much for joining Hard Lens Media. All the best to your campaign, and here's hoping that the 2020 election cycle brings in a new Congress and new Senate. Peace. Let's all do we can to build a better future.